On the day of his funeral, she clutches his suicide note. $50 billion a year. Sex, not love. It was love I was craving. Is there any way I can stop you? Is sex on the cards? Pantyhose? Love, not sex. Love, not sex. They named the people, city by city and town by town. Sex, not love. Erotic. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast, the Sex Series. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, we are going a-wandering today. Oh yes, we are. We are going to go through a few sex-related stories, but that are ultimately looking at and dealing with the one thing. In this episode, I'm going to take you from a London insurance salesman to a suicide note in New Orleans, and then to a multi-million-dollar company brought to its knees. It sounds insane. It is. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Let's start with Michael. Michael is 43 and he works in the world of corporate finance. Sounds fun. I'm only kidding. Anyway, Michael has a stressful job. He deals with lots of pressure. He's constantly dealing with big businesses and big stressed out London insurance types. So London is where Michael is based. So as I said, he is 43. Now, since the age of 18, Michael has battled a dark force in his life. Something has lived inside of him and dominated his life. See what I did there? I used the word dominated because it's the sex series. Honestly, I'm so clever. The thing that lives inside of Michael is an addiction. Now, right, when I say addiction, what do you picture? What comes to your mind? Is it the image of a druggie, a junkie, looking for heroin? Is it a 40 a day smoker, an alcoholic, a gambler? Maybe it's someone you know. Maybe it's you yourself. Maybe it's a recovering addict success story. Well, Michael's addiction isn't smoking, and it isn't gambling, and it isn't heroin. It's sex. And I have to be honest, before coming into the Sex series, I wasn't really too familiar with the ins and outs. So I'm going to stop there, right? Because a part of the problem with the Sex series is that everything sounds like an innuendo. And I bloody love an innuendo, but now I can't stop hearing them. So as I was saying, I didn't know all of the ins and outs of a sex addiction. And I'll be honest, kind of much like any other addiction, I just thought, oh, it's basically about just having as much sex as possible to fulfill the needs. And yeah, in a way it is, but it's also so much deeper. The size of the problem is so much bigger, right? I'm going to have to stop and attempt not to use words like size, bigger, and deeper. Here's what I'm trying to say, right? Here's what I'm trying to get to. Sex addiction was, for years, considered the outsider of the addiction world. It was sort of looked at a little bit like the poor relation of addictions, because it wasn't killing people. Well, yeah, it probably was somewhere. And surely the idea is that, sex addicts, they just need a bit of therapy and they'll get over it. Not the case. Not the case at all. Let's go back to Michael. So, at age 18, Michael has had sex a few years before when he was 15, the average age, I believe, in the UK. And here he is at 18, and yet he's looking for sex, but specifically, he's actually looking for the feelings around having sex so much more than the actual act itself. In that way, it is a bit like gambling. So it's not, gamblers who are addicted will say, it's not really often about the putting money down and the winning. It's the build-up around it. It's the making a choice, where you're going to put your money, how much money. It's that becomes addictive, not the actual act of gambling. Michael says this: let me explain. Don't get me wrong. It's not always the act itself that brings enjoyment, but mostly the thrill of the build-up. The will we, won't we? The thought that I might have sex that day, it drives me. The rush of adrenaline for me comes from the build-up. The sex, well, it's just the icing on the cake. So, at age 18, how does he start to live his life? Well, each day he tries to take himself through the process of the build-up to sex as many times as he can. So, maybe that's, meeting a girl in a bar. They get chatting, it gets flirty. That's where the addiction lies for Michael. It's the play, the cat and mouse game element of it. Now, he was aiming to do this process 2 or 3 times a day, 7 days a week. Not always in bars. Sometimes he was using sex websites. It didn't really matter to Michael who or where or when. It was just the rush of getting potential sex. So, I think the thing is, if we pause for a second And think about it. You know, this is a huge question. Where does addiction come from? Well, experts will say it's the lack of something and we're trying to fix it with the thing that we are addicted to. So if you lack confidence, it's fixed by alcohol. If you have feelings of anxiety, then start smoking. That's going to help. Obviously that's a massive, massive generalisation, and addiction is such a big subject. I do not pretend to be an expert. I could be here until 2025 just trying to unravel what that is. But you get what I'm saying. Again, I'm not pretending that I know, I'm just simply telling you Michael's story. He says this: the thing that was missing for me was love. I had craved love since I was a child. For me, I had a big hole which couldn't be filled. Michael, mate, you are not helping me here with these innuendos. Going to stop talking about big holes. He says the hole was love, and the only way to fill it was sex. He continues, there was an emptiness in me that could only be helped when I thought that sex was on the cards. Around him, his work friends were very, very aware that Michael liked a lot of sex. And they would joke with him, oh, Michael's out shagging tonight, oh, Michael's on the pool, oh, lads. All that pishy banter. But internally, Michael is struggling. And he's really struggling now to keep up with his work. So he's like up all night, trawling websites, looking for someone to meet. And then his workmates make a suggestion to him. Worst suggestion ever. They say, why not try some cocaine? That'll help. Oh, fuck off. The answer to any problem is never try some cocaine. That'll help. No, it won't. In Michael's words. My mate said, why not try some coke? You're trying to do too much at the moment, mate. Coke, it'll just sort your head out and it'll help you juggle the balls. Michael, this is the last time I'm going to speak to you about these innuendos. Cut it out. So you can probably guess where this ends up going. Michael begins to take cocaine daily to be alert enough so that he can go through that build up to sex and then eventual sex 3 times a day. And by now, he's just snowballing into a meltdown to try and fulfill his need. He's having sex 4, sometimes 5 times a day, 7 days a week. His cock must have been red raw. It must have been agony. Oof, that amount of sex. Wowzers, that's going to take its toll. Fucking hell. At one of the lowest points when life is messy and he's missing work and his addiction to both cocaine and sex are in complete control of him, he meets a woman who he actually likes more than, oh, we could just have sex. He really starts to like her. He's a mess. But they begin to date and they actually fall in love. Now, she doesn't know anything about Michael's sex addiction. His cocaine addiction, yes, she knows all about this. And she gets him help. She pays for him to get professional, good help. And so after a year, he has stopped taking cocaine, but the sex addiction, it's still there. He's still continuing to look for sex. Michael and his girlfriend end up married, and they move in together. All the while, he is keeping his addiction a secret. I mean, that's quite the secret to keep, isn't it? How the fuck you keep that a secret? I don't really know. Well, yeah, he was doing things like he was running around at lunch breaks in work and having sex with strangers in public places, or he's pretending to work late, and instead what he's doing is he's going and he's meeting like a Tinder date. Now all the while he's trying to maintain his marriage. Him and his wife, they have a good sex life together. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know how he's got the energy or the sexual power left, but he does. Him and his wife, they have 3 children together. So, by now Michael is in his 30s. His addiction has been with him since he was 18, and it's not slowing down. Michael says, I lived my life split in half. I wanted the attention, the build-up, the frenzy of, am I going to sleep with a stranger today? And then when it was over, I felt shame. But I knew that a few hours later, I would be repeating the same thing. Michael's marriage begins to fail. His wife is now fully aware of the situation, of his sex addiction. And, well, she doesn't end things straight away at first. What she does is she sends him to counselling. It is odd because Michael is saying, what I want is love, what I need is love, that's the thing I'm craving, but here is his wife providing it for him, but it's apparently not enough. When he attends the Sex Addicts Anonymous groups, Michael, he enters a world where he discovers he is not alone. Men and women across the world are suffering every day from this same thing. The counselling also opens up for Michael something he hadn't really thought of before. Like lots of addictions, sex addiction was a mental health problem. And he had never put the two together. I mean, it sounds obvious, but I kind of get what Michael means. It's a bit like if you look at alcoholism, you assume, oh, well, there's something driving that person to drink. There's a demon inside of them that they're trying to drown out or whatever. But it's entirely the same with sex. That might sound naive of me, but it's no more naive than the World Health Organizations, who have only recently come to understand and treat sex addiction properly, because they have finally gone, oh, it's actually a mental health issue. Like, that had seemed to have passed masses of organisations by for years. So, what of Michael's life after his wife and kids leave him? Well, he continues to seek therapy, and being able to get to the root of the problem and the fact that it was love he was craving, this all starts to help Michael overcome his addiction. He's, as I said, right now 43, living and working in London, and he says this: I am a recovering sex addict. I will never truly be over it, but I am in recovery, and that is where I will stay. If recovery works for Michael, then I wish him the best of luck. Let's pause on Michael. His name will be back in the story later. Let's skip across to New Orleans in 2015. Pastor John Gibson is a pastor at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. I have such issues with the word seminary. I can never seem to get it out. Seminary. So, John Gibson, Pastor Gibson, or John as we will know him, he has lived here a long time. He's in his mid-50s now. He's been married to his wife Christy for 25 years, and they have 2 kids, both adults now. So John, Pastor Gibson, he is very popular in the seminary. His sermons, his lectures, they are well attended because John had a very open, easy, lovely manner of communication. And he was known as quite funny, quite entertaining. Everyone who knew him was just like, this is a great guy. He is a great guy. So like I said, he's 56 at the time that we know him. And well, how has he got here? Well, he spent 17 years being a minister in New Orleans, working in different parts of the city. He went on to become a doctor of theology and gain a master's in divinity. Fancy. John, he taught hundreds of lectures to students a year, and they loved him. They absolutely loved him. Every photo you ever see of John, he's smiling. He just looks like the happiest guy in the world. John is known around campus for one other thing, and I think this is really sweet. Outside of his biblical studies and teachings, John had a deep interest in cars. He had fixed up cars all of his life. He'd sort of learned it as a boy, and it was his favourite hobby. So, right, if any student, any member of staff, anyone in the local area had a problem with their vehicle, they just went to John. He would happily fix their car right there, no bother. He didn't charge them for it. He didn't ask for anything. He just fixed those tyres, went into the engines, fixed the faulty brakes, because he loved it. He just loved to help people by doing this. So, we're getting the picture right. John's a happy family man, got his lovely wife of 25 years, but underneath all of this, and behind closed doors, John had something else going on. A depression lived inside of John, which he had battled for years. And like many millions, John just tried to battle through. What was causing John's depression? Well, it was an addiction. An addiction to sex. Pastor John Gibson had been a sex addict since his youth. Now, it was something he was open about with his wife, and it's something that they had struggled through in their marriage. So unlike Michael's story, the first story, he wasn't hiding it from anyone. His wife knew. His kids didn't know. No one else around him knew, but his wife, she knew. So years of counselling and therapy, it hadn't really helped John. He was still seeking sex with strangers as often as he could. Anyone he could have sex with would do. 25 years into his marriage, he was still sleeping with 7 or 8 strangers a week. But to those who knew him, he was just this fantastic Pastor Gibson, this great guy, but internally he had this battle going on. Now obviously when we talk about addiction, there is shame. So take that and double what John felt. He was a pastor, for goodness sakes. This made it for him so much worse. As he saw it, he was supposed to be able to steer people away from a life of sin and help those who needed it. And here he was, unable to help himself. So for years, he kept the secret hidden. Only his wife knew of the internal battle he was going through. So, we can look at the situation and you can say, well, was he harming anyone? Well, yeah, his marriage. Was he still doing a great job? Yes, he was. So this was just where John was. John was just carrying on with this. So what changed on August 24th, 2011 for John? Well, the day began as normal. His wife, Christy, she left to go to her job. And John, he was at home preparing lectures, as usual. If he wasn't teaching or fixing cars, he was preparing lectures. So, Christy goes to work, and John is alone. When Christy comes back into the house at 6 p.m. that evening, she finds a devastating and unbelievable sight. John is lying dead on the living room floor of the family home. Beside him lies an empty bottle of pills and a half-drunk bottle of vodka. And next to that, a suicide note. Christy called paramedics. They arrived quickly, but it was too late. Pastor John Gibson was dead. His body was removed from the home, and Christy had the awful job of now informing their 2 children that their father was dead. So we're going to pause on John in New Orleans and pause on Michael in London. And for 1 second, we're going to go to New York. Specifically, we're going to go to a week before John Gibson took his own life. The CEO of a major media company is at home, relaxing on a Sunday evening. I'll just picture it. Must be brilliant. Must be brilliant to be the CEO of a company. Just imagining him there in a big massive penthouse in New York. Like, I've got all the money in the world. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just constant stress. I suppose technically I am the CEO of Extraordinary Stories podcast. But I can assure you, it's not multi-millions, and I'm not living in New York yet. Anyway, Noel Biderman is the CEO of a huge company. And on that Sunday evening, when he's relaxing, he receives a phone call with devastating news. He picks up the phone and his side of the conversation goes like this. Hello? What? Who is this? Can I stop you? Who got access? Is this going to break tonight or tomorrow? Is there a way to stop this? Money? Protection? Please, before you go, don't do this. You will hurt a lot of people. Noel Biderman was the man in charge of the website Ashley Madison, an exclusive website for adulterers. A secret, secure website where married people could hook up with other married people without ever being caught. Ashley Madison had close to 37 million users around the world. Men and women equally signed up to this exclusive secret organisation, and they signed up for just that reason, the secrecy. Ashley Madison promised absolute discretion. You could have been married for 20 years, you could have been married for 20 minutes, it doesn't matter. You come on that website, everyone's there, they understand the boundaries, the rules, we're all just here looking for a bit of sex, but we're all in relationships. That's fine. So you could have as many affairs as you wanted. It was anonymous. People would never know. Well, that was until that phone call. The phone call was to tell the CEO that internet hackers had just got hold of the details of every single member on that site. And that included names, addresses, zip codes, postcodes, their jobs, pictures, details of their sexual interests, and messages that were sent between different members. And the entire list was about to be published online for the world to see. Ashley Madison, the woman herself, a New Yorker, she went bananas at the news. This would be the end of her multi-million-dollar business. Noel Biderman would be fired as CEO now that all of these details had been leaked. But you know what? I don't really care about these two. Fuck them. They've made their millions from this website. Instead, who I care about is the people who thought they were taking part in something that was secret, and it turned out not to be. The following day, true to the hacker's word, the entire list of names was published. So when the names were first listed, people went berserk. They were running to find these lists and look at them. Across the world, people were checking if their partners had ever used the service or if their relatives were involved. Pictures of people on that website were flooding internet sites. I remember it at the time. It was insane. Twitter, you just couldn't move for like more Ashley Madison stuff coming out all the time. Then what journalists started to do, and this is where it got even more dangerous, they started taking it and grouping it by city. So first of all, they'd be like, there's 30,000 people in this city on this website. Then they would take it and they would actually break it down into town that people lived in. And they were reeling off the names of these people live on TV. Can you imagine if you were on that list? Can you imagine if you knew you were on that website and you're sitting there thinking, fingers crossed, please don't say it, please don't say it, please don't say my name, please don't say my name. Oh, they've said my name. Great. I mean, no one was escaping that leak without their name being out there. The Ashley Madison website had to close. They had to hand back millions in refunds to people who had paid for secrecy. But way, way bigger than the money, they had to deal with the consequences. And the consequences across the world were way bigger than just shutting down a website. There were divorces. Spouses were seeing their partner's name and marriages were ending. Lawsuits were being brought against people who had families ripped apart by this publishing of names. And sadly, there were a number of suicides. People who just couldn't handle the shame of their name being published. So if we go back to London and to Michael. Michael sees the Ashley Madison leak on the news and he goes to check quickly, and right there is his name. He was one of the members and he had joined when he was married. Now for Michael, this is okay. I mean, it's not great that his name is attached, but well, he's now divorced and he's trying to move on from his addiction. In New Orleans, it was a different story. When the news broke about the website, Pastor John Gibson immediately went cold inside. He knew his name would be on that list. John knew at that point the days were closing in on him being able to avoid his name appearing in the press as another adulterer. He felt this would be the point that everyone would learn about his sex addiction, and so he decided rather than go through that, it would be easier to die. So as Christy prepares for John's funeral, the day arrives and it's a well-attended funeral. There's thousands of mourners, lots of John's friends and family, and she's clutching his suicide note. In the note, he explains that battling his sex addiction in private with Christy's help was manageable, but now that the world has seen his name and his photo published in the Ashley Madison leak, there is no way to turn that around. The shame he felt that his students, his children, his colleagues would know, it was too much to bear. It was there online for everyone to see, and that's why he had to end it. This really sad thing is that John's family will say, we would have helped him. We have tried. We would have stood by him through this. But he felt, in the eyes of God, he'd been shamed. He had shamed himself and his family by joining that website, the website for sinners. So when John was buried at his funeral, his family and his friends urged people to remember John not as a sex addict. Remember the great man that he was. The man who'd fix your car and give you an entertaining sermon. The Ashley Madison Company never made a statement about John's death. Ashley Madison still continues now and has lots of members, and that's not an innuendo. So while Michael continues in London to try and control his addiction, Pastor Gibson just couldn't face the public shame of a sex addiction. And so ends the story. Okay, yeah, weird. Yeah. I just sort of wanted to look at sex addiction, and I just think it's interesting that you've got two names who were both published on that leak, and, you know, the outcome of it for both of them is so very different. Okay, well, that was the second episode in the sex series. If you want to get in touch, you can join the Facebook group, like the Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram. I'm always hanging about. Get in touch. Yeah. Until the next episode, I hope you enjoyed this. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.